I want to press you on an issue that I know you're very reluctant to talk about, and that is Israel's economy.
I love that one.
You said, ask me about Israel's economy. You tell us, what do you want people to know? What do you want people to take away? That's going to be my last question, so go for it.
I think the supremacy of free markets is not self-evident. I think it has to be explained. I think the task of leaders is, first of all, to get things conceptually right, but the second is to communicate it effectively. When I became finance minister in the midst of a crisis in 2003, we were in a horrible crisis. Our economy was shrinking, our GDP per capita was shrinking, we had terrible unemployment and so on. And most people thought it was because of the intifada that we had at the time, or the collapse, you remember the NASDAQ bubble bursting and so on. That had an effect on us. And I thought that certainly contributed to it. But I didn't think that was the major problem. And so I had about 3 weeks to come up with an economic plan that ultimately made many, many changes in Israel. But I thought no less intensely about how do I communicate this to a country that doesn't have lemonade stands when you're a kid. You have little cards that when I was a child, and you could see this was a MiG fighter and this was a Mystère fighter. That's what we traded as cards. We didn't have lemonade stands. We had a fairly semi-socialist economy. So how do I explain the idea of free markets and their centrality in today's world? And so 3 weeks later, I did a press conference and I said, I want to fall back on my first day in basic training in the Israeli paratroops. The commander put us in a straight line and he said, you're not going to take a race, but it's a special kind of race. Each man looked to his right. You are the first man, he pointed to me, put the guy to your right on your shoulders. And the next guy did that. And then a guy after him did that. And I got a pretty big guy, was heavy. The next guy was the smallest guy in the platoon, and he got the biggest guy on his shoulders. And the third guy was a big guy, and he got a small guy, and so on. And then the commander blew the whistle. I barely managed to move forward. The next guy, the guy next to me, the small guy with the big guy on his shoulders, collapsed. And the third guy took off like a rocket, and won the race. And I said, in the modern economies, all national economies are pairs of a public sector sitting on the shoulders of a private sector. In our case, the public sector became too big, too fat, and we're about to collapse. So we have to put the fat man on a diet, and we have to strengthen the guy at the bottom, give him a lot of oxygen in his lungs. That means lowering tax rates. And third, we have to remove the obstacles, the barriers to the race, barriers to competition. By the way, this became known as the fat man, thin man thing, and taxi drivers could repeat it. But effectively, we ended up doing exactly that. We constrained the growth of public spending. We lowered tax rates. I had a big argument about that. They said, who's this guy, Laufer? I said, no, it's not Laufer. His name is Laffer. And we actually tried it, and it works. It worked for us, big time. And we instituted a lot of reforms. I mean, even earlier as prime minister in my first term, I removed all constraints on foreign currency exchange, and that was supposed to collapse our economy. And of course, everybody was warning me that a mountain of money will move. It did into the country, and so we did all these reforms. And the consequence of that is that we grew at 5% a year for a decade. with the exception of 2008. We still grew, but we grew at 5% per decade. And we have now overcome, past many leading economies in the world. And if we continue to adhere to free market principles and encourage innovation and open new markets to the East, new products, new markets, deregulation, and infrastructure, which we're investing in mightily, then I think Israel has a brilliant economic future. The thing that I have to tell you, though, is that although our GDP per capita is rising rapidly, we have a small GDP. We have 8 million people. We can be number one in cyber. We are. We can be number one in many other things, but we're small. And therefore, we have to compensate that with other means. Among others, the American military assistance, which is invaluable. But I think that the race that I described, the thin man, fat man race, is ongoing. You always have to improve the performance of your economy. You have to make sure that government does not interfere with ingenuity, but actually promotes it. And you can never rest on your laurels. Never rest on your laurels. Life is competitive. The life of nations is competitive. You should always hone your competitive edge. This is not something that consultants tell you. It's some things that leaders have to do. You have to hone the competitive edge of your people. And you should have as much alliances as you can with other like-minded states, like the United States of America.